Tokugawa Ieyasu, the shogun who ruled Japan for only 2 years, but in that time established a powerful legacy that lasted over 250 years. But before he became the architect of Japan's longest peace, he was something entirely different, a hostage. At just 6 years old, he was sent away, captured, traded like a pawn between rival clans. And yet, in the shadows of captivity, Ieyasu learned the greatest skill of all, patience. He watched, he waited, and one day, he would strike. But how does a boy, taken as a political pawn, rise to become the most powerful man in Japan? How does he not just survive, but dominate? The answer lies in a single, pivotal battle that changed the course of history, Sekigahara. Imagine this. Japan is torn apart by war. Feudal lords, samurai warriors, and alliances shift by the day. And in the middle of it all, a man in his 60s steps onto the battlefield, ready to decide the fate of a nation. Most warriors seize power in their youth. Ieyasu, he did it at 60. But before we dive into the battle that shaped Japan, let's go back. Who was Ieyasu before he became the legend? The boy named Matsudaira Takechiyo was born into a Japan ripped apart by war. The Sengoku period was a brutal time of constant conflict. Lords, known as daimyos, fought for control, and alliances were forged and broken overnight. Into this chaos, Takechiyo was born, a child destined for anything but peace. At 6 years old, he was taken from his home, separated from his family, and sent as a hostage to the powerful Imagawa clan. Now, being a hostage in 16th century Japan wasn't just about confinement. It was a statement. Your life hung in the balance, dependent on your family's loyalty to their overlords. But even as a young boy, Ieyasu absorbed the lessons of survival. He learned the art of diplomacy. He studied his captors, and he internalized the way of the samurai, of loyalty, patience, and combat. However, fate had different plans for him. When the Imagawa clan faced defeat at the hands of the ruthless Oda Nobunaga, Ieyasu's future was rewritten. His captors were gone, and with them his chains. But instead of returning to his family in disgrace, Ieyasu forged an alliance with Nobunaga himself. And this partnership, it would change the course of history. Under Nobunaga's guidance, Ieyasu found himself amidst wars, betrayals, and power struggles. Nobunaga was a force to be reckoned with, a daimyo feared and respected across Japan. For Ieyasu, it was the perfect opportunity to hone his skills on the battlefield and in court intrigue. But just as quickly as Nobunaga's star rose, it fell. Assassinated by one of his own generals, Nobunaga's death left a power vacuum that sent Japan spiraling into chaos once again. But Ieyasu, he didn't crumble. He adapted. He aligned himself with another rising star, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Nobunaga's former ally. Together, they would forge a united Japan, until Hideyoshi's death left Ieyasu in the perfect position to make his move. And that brings us to many years later, Sekigahara, the battle that would change everything. It's October of 1600. Ieyasu is now 57 years old. His forces, though outnumbered, stand firm. His enemies, a coalition of daimyos loyal to Hideyoshi's family, gather their strength for what they believe will be a final push to destroy Ieyasu once and for all. But Ieyasu had something they didn't: experience, alliances, and a mind sharp as a blade. The battle began in chaos, as most do. Thousands of warriors clashed, the thunder of hooves, the clash of steel, the cries of men locked in combat. But amidst the chaos, Ieyasu remained calm. His patience would pay off, as key defections within the enemy ranks turned the tide in his favor. By the end of the day, the battlefield was his. This wasn't just a victory. It was the moment Ieyasu had been waiting for, decades in the making. With his enemies defeated, there was no one left to challenge him. 3 years later, in 1603, he was declared shogun. The boy who was once a hostage had become the most powerful man in Japan. But here's the thing about Ieyasu. His reign wasn't just about war. In fact, after Sekigahara, Ieyasu focused on one thing: peace. He knew that the only way to truly control Japan was to keep it stable. And stable it was for over 250 years. Let's talk about Ieyasu's achievements during this era of peace, the Edo period. For starters, Ieyasu wasn't just a brilliant strategist in war, but also in politics and architecture. He built grand fortresses, the most notable being Edo Castle, which would later become modern-day Tokyo. At its peak, Edo was the largest castle in Japan, both a symbol of power and a fortress of control. But it wasn't just fortresses. Ieyasu fostered trade with foreign powers, specifically the Dutch, Portuguese, and Spanish, managing to keep Japan connected to the world while also maintaining its isolation. His diplomacy was delicate but firm. He welcomed trade that benefited Japan. But when it came to foreign influence, particularly the spread of Christianity, he took a hard stance. In 1614, Ieyasu banned Christianity across Japan. Some say this was purely political, a way to prevent European influence from disrupting his rule. Others believe it was a deeper personal conviction. Either way, it was a move that would shape Japan for centuries. But Ieyasu's reign wasn't without mystery. As with many great rulers, his death in 1616 left behind more questions than answers. Officially, it was said he died of natural causes, stomach cancer, they called it. But rumors of poison swirled. Was it a final act of revenge from one of his many enemies? Or perhaps someone much closer to him? No one knows for sure. What we do know is that Ieyasu's legacy didn't die with him. The Tokugawa Shogunate would go on to rule Japan for over 250 years, an unprecedented era of peace and stability that historians still marvel at today. But the question remains, what made Ieyasu different? Why did he succeed where so many others had failed? The answer, I believe, lies in his ability to play the long game. While others rushed into battle, Ieyasu waited, watching, learning, and striking only when the time was right. Patience was his greatest weapon. And that is the story of Tokugawa Ieyasu, a man who, against all odds, turned captivity into power, who seized control of Japan not with brute force, but with a calculated mind and unwavering patience. So, what would Japan have become without Tokugawa Ieyasu? That's a question we might never truly answer. But one thing's for certain, his impact on the nation is felt even today. And if you've made it this far, then you're just as captivated by history as I am. So, if you're ready to dive deeper into the stories of warriors, empires, and the legends who shaped our world, like and subscribe. The best stories are just waiting to be told. See you next time at War and Wisdom in History.